Welcome back to part two of the lecture on the Mongols. I want to talk a little bit about Mongol military prowess here. For such a small population of horsemen to overrun the great sedentary civilizations of Eurasia is pretty remarkable. When you think of the sheer number of people in China and India and Persia and Mesopotamia and Europe, Russia, that the Mongols will overrun and control for about a century. We have to ask ourselves, how were they able to do this? Well, there's a number of factors. I'm going to go through them. First of all, these are expert horsemen. The Mongols live a good portion of their life on horseback, so they're expert riders. I remember reading, I can't remember the source now, but I remember reading about Mongol reaction to being in these large Chinese cities with thousands of pedestrians. This was baffling to the Mongols, why these people were not on horseback. And I also read that the Mongols tended to treat human pedestrians like they treated livestock. They would herd them. So they're expert horsemen. They use a compound bow, which throws an arrow with great velocity. And of course the stirrup, which allows the Mongol horseman to stay firmly on the horse while he continues to fire his arrows at you as he circles you, comes at you from on the flanks and surprises you. The Mongols use tactics of deceit. I think Genghis Khan was central in these innovations of deceit. When the Mongols would camp, for instance, Genghis Khan would have many more campfires lit than were necessary. This was to deceive anyone spying on the Mongol camp, making it look bigger than it actually was. I've read that Genghis Khan had straw men strapped to horses, so at a distance the Mongol army looked bigger than it was. The Mongols also practiced what we called a feigned retreat, whereby they would lure the enemy into a trap and then surround them and ambush them by pretending to retreat. This occurred in Eastern Europe, in Hungary, I think in the early 13th century, 1220 something, I can't remember the exact date, where a Christian army was lured into pursuing Mongol horsemen who appeared to be fleeing the battlefield. Of course, the Mongol horsemen simply split into two portions and then doubled back, encircled the Christian army, and slaughtered them. So these are tactics of deceit. The Mongols borrow technology from everyone, catapults and various things from the Chinese, the Indians, the Persians, and put these to their own good use. Superior Chinese technology often helped the Mongols in their victories. The Mongols had horses, they had mobility, they had advanced tactical skills, and the vast expanses of the steppe enabled them to withdraw if necessary and to evade greater forces. Foreign visitors, well, we talked about Marco Polo the last time. You remember that Polo, upon returning to Europe, wrote the description of the world. He had help with this. Some people think that it's embellished. Other people wonder why certain Chinese cultural practices are not mentioned in it. We have other visitors, William of Rubric and John of Plano Carpini. These are both Christian priests who visited the Mongols as they approached Europe, essentially to sort of spy on them and to write up reports to inform the Pope and European monarchs of this strange and alien people that have appeared out of the East. What are their goals? What do they want? What are their practices? These are very interesting documents to read. You can Google them and actually read them online. Consequences of the Mongols? Well, they accelerate the interaction among civilizations, expanding the web, making it stronger. The Mongols carried knowledge from China to the West. Chinese gunpowder and printing, The technology gap will begin to close as the Mongols disseminate information. Mongols tended to confirm through their trade network, they confirmed Chinese predominance in trade and manufacturing. The Black Death is spread by the Mongols across this vast trade circuit from China all the way to the Mediterranean. Scandinavia and southern India were spared as the plague-bearing black rat preferred not to dwell there. So thank God for small mercies, I suppose, geographic good luck. Of course, the Black Death is going to destroy about a third of the Eurasian population. We're going to talk about this. And of course, there are major religious responses to the Black Death. It appears that the world is coming to an end, and of course, people are going to have spiritual reaction to that. I'm going to end here by talking about Mongol Decline. Having conquered the better portion of Eurasia, the Mongols will rapidly decline. There's a failed invasion of Japan by Kublai Khan. This has an impact on the Japanese as well, giving them a sense of superiority and inevitable rule. Chinese rebelled against Mongol rule. The Mongol Empire is broken into various khanates. You can look at the map here and you can see the Mongol Empire divided up among the various khanates across Eurasia. Russians fought to oust the Mongols from their territories. Of course, this will be the beginning of the Russian state. The Black Death will hinder the Mongol trade circuit. Of course, trade, the Mongols controlled a lot of this trade across Eurasia. And as brokers, of course, they took their commissions from this trade. And this enriched them and made them powerful. Now, the Black Death is going to spread. And as it does, trade is going to diminish. And as trade diminishes, Mongol power diminishes as well. The invention of gunpowder. Gunpowder empires in southern Asia, in Europe, in the Far East, are going to be able to counter the Mongol tactics. The riders, the men on horseback aren't going to have their mobility, their speed is going to be counteracted by artillery and by gunpowder weapons. Another factor in the decline of the Mongols is, I guess we just call it assimilation. The Mongols are assimilated into the greater societies that they had earlier overrun. So from China all the way to Mesopotamia, you see Mongol rulers becoming Chinese or Indian or Persian or Arabic. This is a process that takes place over a century. And it obviously diminishes Mongol rule. I can give you one example off the top of my head. We've already talked about Kublai Khan. You can imagine a young Kublai Khan, a Mongol warrior on horseback, as he conquers China in the 13th century. And then picture Kublai Khan when he's 75 years old, and he's no longer a Mongol horseman. He's no longer a nomadic warrior. Now he's a fat and happy Chinese emperor with a harem and plenty of cooks to prepare food and all sorts of diversions for him. This is what happens to the Mongols. They become absorbed or assimilated by these superior civilizations that they had conquered. And in this way, the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, will come to an end as we move into the 14th, 15th centuries. So it's an interesting and important interlude in world history, this Mongol hegemony, and it has these profound impacts. So we'll stop there with the Mongols. Thank you.